I found the notice frozen to my mailbox just after sunrise, half buried under a fresh layer of powder, the red ink smeared like it had bled through the cold, and for a second I honestly thought it was some kind of joke. Violation: visible snow track patterns in driveway. Fine, $150. I stood there in 12 inches of lake-effect snow, boots sinking, coffee going cold in my hand, and just stared at it, because I've spent most of my adult life moving snow for a living, and I've seen a lot of dumb complaints, but I had never, not once, heard of snow tracks being illegal. My name's Garrett Cole. I'm 46, born in Iron Ridge, Wisconsin, and I've been running plows and heavy equipment for the county since I was 23. 20-plus years of night shifts, whiteout storms, black ice, engines screaming at 3 in the morning. You get to know snow in a way most people don't. You learn how it moves, how it packs, how it freezes into something that'll snap an axle if you underestimate it. So yeah, seeing someone find me over tire tracks in my own driveway felt like getting lectured about fire safety by someone who's never lit a match. That driveway, by the way, isn't some little suburban strip of concrete. It's a 138-foot gravel run that slopes about 7 degrees down toward the road, wide enough for my truck and plow blade, edged with old pine my dad planted back in '92. He built the house himself. Well, mostly himself, with help from 2 buddies and a lot of borrowed tools. I still have his workbench in the garage, same oil stains, same chipped corner where he dropped a torque wrench sometime in the early 2000s. I bought the place from my mom after he passed. Paid $187,000 for it, even though she tried to sell it to me for less. Said it should stay in the family, and I told her it would, but I wasn't about to take it for free. Some things you pay for because they mean something. So yeah, that driveway matters. Not just because it's mine, but because it's tied to everything that came before me. And apparently, according to the HOA, it was now a visual disturbance. Now, I knew who that came from before I even looked at the signature. Diane Mercer, HOA president, early 50s, always dressed like she's about to attend a board meeting even when she's just walking her dog, drives a white Lexus SUV that somehow always looks freshly washed even in February. She moved into the neighborhood about 3 years ago, right around the time the subdivision decided it needed to modernize. Before that, this place wasn't really HOA heavy. Yeah, there were guidelines, but nobody enforced them like gospel. You kept your place decent. You waved at your neighbors, maybe helped push someone out of a snowbank once or twice. That was about the extent of community involvement. Then Diane showed up, and suddenly we had printed notices, scheduled inspections, and phrases like aesthetic consistency getting tossed around like they meant something out here. The first time I met her was actually pretty civil. She came up my driveway one afternoon in late fall, leaves still on the ground, clipboard in hand, smiling like she'd practiced it. "Mr. Cole, right?" she said. "Garrett's fine," I told her. "Well, Garrett," she went on, glancing around like she was evaluating the place. "We're just doing some routine reviews of properties, making sure everything aligns with community standards." I remember leaning against my truck, wiping grease off my hands with a rag, and thinking, this isn't going to go well long term. "What kind of standards?" I asked. "Oh, nothing major," she said quickly, still smiling. "Just things like driveway maintenance, exterior appearance, vehicle visibility, keeping things uniform." Uniform. That word stuck with me. I looked past her at the trees, the uneven line of gravel, the old mailbox my dad welded together. None of it was uniform. And that was kind of the point. "Well," I said, "this place has been standing just fine for 30 years without much uniformity." Her smile tightened just a little. "Times change," she said. "Yeah, they do." The first notice after that came about 2 weeks later. Something about improper storage of commercial equipment. They were talking about my plow truck. My work truck, parked in my own driveway. I called her about that one. "Diane," I said, trying to keep it calm, "this isn't some abandoned vehicle. I use that truck every day. It's registered, insured, everything." "I understand," she said, in that tone people use when they don't actually care. "But the presence of commercial-grade equipment can affect property values." "It's a pickup with a plow blade," I said. "Half the county owns one." "Not within this community," she replied. That was the first time I felt it, that little shift from annoyance to something else. Not anger exactly, more like a warning bell going off somewhere in the back of my head. Still, I let it go. Parked the truck a little further back, tried to stay under the radar. Then winter hit. And with winter came the tracks. Now, if you've never dealt with real snow, not the postcard stuff, but the kind that comes down sideways and piles up overnight, you might not realize this, but tracks are unavoidable. You drive in, you drive out. The snow compacts, freezes, gets layered over. It's just part of living up here. Apparently, though, Diane saw it differently. The second notice came 3 days after the first storm. $150 fine. The third notice came a week later. Same issue. $350 this time. I remember standing in my kitchen, both letters spread out on the counter, Lori, my wife, leaning against the sink, arms crossed. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Yeah," I muttered, running a hand over my face. "It is. So what are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away, because the honest answer was, I didn't know yet. Part of me wanted to just pay it, keep the peace, not turn it into something bigger. We'd lived quiet for years. No problems. No drama. But another part of me, the part that spent decades dealing with ice, pressure, systems that either hold or break, kept saying the same thing over and over in my head. This doesn't stop here. And I think, deep down, I knew that was true the moment I saw that first notice frozen to my mailbox. I just didn't realize yet how far it was going to go. The fourth notice showed up on a Thursday, and this one didn't bother pretending to be polite anymore. Final warning before lien consideration. Total balance, $2,450. I remember just standing there in the garage, engine of the truck still ticking as it cooled, that letter in my hand, and something in me finally snapped. Not loud, not explosive, just quiet. The kind of quiet where you stop arguing with something and start figuring out how it actually works. Because up until that point, I'd been reacting, adjusting, trying to play within rules that clearly weren't written for people like me. That morning, I stopped reacting. That night, I didn't sleep much. Sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, coffee going cold every half hour, just writing things down, dates, notices, wording, every conversation I could remember. Lori came out around midnight, wrapped in a blanket, looked at me for a second and just said, "You're done playing nice, aren't you?" I didn't look up. I'm done guessing. The next morning, instead of heading straight out on my route, I made a stop at the county office over in Pine Hollow. Old brick building, been there since the 40s, smells like paper and dust and burnt coffee. You walk in there enough times, people start recognizing you. And in my line of work, you end up there more than you'd think. That's where I ran into Martin Keller. Martin's been with the county engineering department for, hell, I think going on 30 years now. Tall guy, gray beard, the kind of person who doesn't waste words but knows exactly where everything is buried, both on paper and underground. He looked up when I walked in. "Garrett, you break something or are you fixing something?" "Trying to understand something," I said, holding up the folder I'd put together. He gave a little half smile. "That's usually worse." We ended up in a back office with a map table, one of those big ones with rolled blueprints stacked underneath. I laid everything out, letters, fines, photos of the driveway, and he read through them slowly, adjusting his glasses halfway through like he didn't quite believe what he was seeing. "They're fining you for snow tracks," he said finally. "Apparently it's an aesthetic issue." He let out a short breath, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "That's a new one." Then he leaned back, folded his arms, and stared at the ceiling for a second. "What road are you on again?" "Timber Ridge Lane." That's when something shifted. Subtle, but I caught it. "Timber Ridge," he repeated, then reached under the table and pulled out a rolled map. Spread it open, ran his finger along a set of lines until he found it. "There," he said, tapping the page. "That's not a standard private road." "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Just stood up, walked over to a filing cabinet, and started digging through folders. Real folders, not digital. The kind that still have handwritten labels and edges worn soft from being handled for years. "Give me a second," he muttered. 10 minutes later, he came back with a thin stack of documents, yellowed at the edges, stamped and re-stamped over the years. "Ever heard of an emergency access designation?" he asked. I shook my head. "Back in '98, he said, flipping to one page. "This entire stretch, Timber Ridge and the connecting spur roads, was classified as secondary emergency access. Basically means, during certain conditions, the county has jurisdiction to ensure it stays passable." "Okay," I said slowly. And he continued, tapping another line. The HOA doesn't actually maintain it directly. They contract it out. Yeah, I figured that. Except, he said, flipping to another page, their last registered contract expired about 14 months ago. I blinked. Wait, what? Expired. No renewal filed. No new contractor registered with the county. I felt something shift in my chest then. Not anger this time, something sharper. Focused. So who's responsible right now? I asked. Martin looked at me over the top of his glasses. In practice, he said. You are. I frowned. I'm just doing my county route. Exactly, he said. And under emergency conditions, your route takes priority over any uncontracted private maintenance. I leaned back in the chair, letting that settle. So if there's a storm, he nodded slowly. And that road isn't officially covered. It's not your job to fix it unless directed. And if it's not cleared, then it becomes a liability issue, he said. For the HOA? Personally, in some cases. That was the first moment I felt it. The shift. The balance moving, just a little. Not because I'd won anything yet, but because I finally understood the system I was standing in. I left that office with copies of everything. Maps, contracts, expiration notices. About 37 pages in total. Cost me $18.50 in printing fees and about 2 hours of my shift. Worth every penny. That afternoon, I made one more stop. Carla Jensen, local attorney, specializes in property and municipal overlap. Small office downtown. Nothing fancy, but she's got a reputation for knowing exactly where the lines are and how to use them. She read through the documents the same way Martin had, slow, careful, quiet. Then she looked up at me. They pushed you first, didn't they? Yeah, I said. They did. She nodded once. Good. I raised an eyebrow. Good. It means you're responding, she said. Not initiating. That matters. We spent about an hour going through everything. What the HOA could legally enforce, where they were overreaching, what my position actually was under county code. Here's the key, she said at one point, tapping the map. You don't fight them head on. You let the situation expose itself. How? She leaned back in her chair, hands folded. You do your job, she said. Exactly your job. Nothing more, nothing less. I knew what she meant before she finished the sentence. And I'll be honest, part of me didn't like it at first. Not because it was wrong, but because I knew what it would lead to. People would get frustrated, maybe even stuck. It wouldn't just be Diane feeling the pressure, it'd be everyone. But then I thought about those notices. The fines. The way she'd stood in my driveway talking about uniformity, like this place was something she owned. And I realized she'd already made it everyone's problem. I just hadn't responded yet. 3 days later, the storm hit. Started late evening, light at first, then heavier around midnight. By 2 in the morning, we were looking at full whiteout conditions, wind pushing snow sideways, visibility down to maybe 20 feet if you were lucky. By the time my shift started at 3:30 a.m., we'd already logged about 9 inches, and it wasn't slowing down. I ran my route like I always do. County roads first, priority paths, emergency lanes. Blade down, steady speed, clear lines. Muscle memory at this point. But when I got to the turnoff for Timber Ridge Lane, I didn't turn. I kept going. And I remember, clear as anything, checking the mirror as I passed it. That narrow stretch of road, already starting to disappear under fresh snow, wind drifting it shut almost as fast as it fell. I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't feel wrong either. Because for the first time since all this started, I wasn't reacting. I was following the system, exactly the way it was written. By noon, the snowfall hit 17 inches. By 2 p.m., my phone started ringing. By 2 p.m., my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. First it was Lori. Garrett, people are stuck, she said, voice tight, like she was trying not to sound worried in front of Ethan. Bill can't get his truck out. The miller's kid missed a doctor's appointment. What's going on? I closed my eyes for a second, leaning back in the cab, engine idling low beneath me. I'm running my assigned route, I said carefully. County roads first. There was a pause on the other end. Not silence, just understanding settling in. This is about the HOA, isn't it? I exhaled slowly. It's about the rules they're so proud of. She didn't argue, didn't tell me I was wrong, just said, come home when you can, and hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. Diane. I let it ring twice before answering. Mr. Cole, she snapped, no greeting, no pretense this time. Why has Timber Ridge not been cleared? I kept my voice even. Because it's not on my assigned county priority list. That's ridiculous, she shot back. You've always cleared it. Not officially, I said. It's a private road. HOA responsibility. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. We expect cooperation from our residents. I almost laughed at that, but I didn't. And I expect not to be fined for snow existing in my driveway, I said. Guess we're both adjusting. You're putting people at risk, she said, her voice tightening, shifting from authority to something closer to panic. No, I replied quietly. I'm following the system. The same one you've been using on me for the past month. That hit. I could hear it in the silence that followed. This isn't over, she said finally. No, I agreed. It's not. She hung up. By late afternoon, the snow hit just over 18 inches. Drifts along Timber Ridge were pushing close to 3 feet in some spots, especially near the curve by Halvorson's place where the wind always cuts sideways through the trees. And just like Carla said, the situation started exposing itself. Neighbors began calling each other first, then the HOA, then, eventually, the county. By 4:30, I got a call from dispatch. Garrett, the supervisor said, we're getting multiple reports from Timber Ridge. Roads impassable. Copy that, I said. Is that under contract? No, sir, I replied. Contract expired. No renewal on file. There was a pause. Papers shuffling. All right, he said. Stand by. 20 minutes later, I got the follow-up. County inspectors heading out. You stay on primary routes. Understood. And just like that, it wasn't just between me and Diane anymore. Around 5:15, as the light started fading and that blue-gray winter dusk settled in, I pulled my truck over at the end of Timber Ridge. Didn't go in. Just parked there, engine running, hazard lights blinking against the falling snow. And I watched. Car stuck halfway up the entrance. A couple of residents out with shovels, bundled up, moving snow that would be back in 10 minutes. Frustration in every movement. Then I saw her. White Lexus, parked sideways near the entrance, hazard lights flashing like it was somehow helping. Diane stepped out, boots sinking immediately, coat wrapped tight around her. She spotted my truck and started walking toward me. Fast, slipping once, but catching herself. By the time she reached the driver's side, she was already talking. This is unacceptable, she said, breath visible, voice sharp but shaky underneath. People are stranded. Emergency vehicles won't be able to get through. I rolled the window down slowly. Yeah, I said. That's what happens when a road isn't maintained. Her eyes narrowed. You're the only one who can clear this. Not the only one, I said. Just the only one currently authorized and available. Then do it, she snapped. I tilted my head slightly. Under what contract? That stopped her. For just a second. Then she pushed forward anyway. We'll sort that out later. Right now, you need to act. I reached over, grabbed the folder from the passenger seat, and held it up. 14 months expired, I said. No renewal. No registered contractor. According to county code, that makes this your responsibility. My responsibility? She repeated, almost incredulous. Yours, I said. And the board's. Personally, if it's proven you neglected maintenance on a designated emergency access route. Her expression shifted then, just slightly. Not gone yet, but cracking. This is intimidation, she said. No, I replied calmly. This is documentation. Right on cue, headlights appeared behind her. County inspector. Pickup truck, dark green, county seal on the door. He pulled up, stepped out, clipboard already in hand, boots crunching through the snow as he approached. Evening, he said, looking between the two of us. Which one of you represents the HOA? Diane straightened immediately. I do. Diane Mercer, president. He nodded, made a note. We've received multiple reports of an impassable emergency access road. You currently under contract for snow removal. She hesitated. Just long enough. We're in the process of. He held up a hand. Yes or no? No. Another note. All right, he said. Then you're in violation of County Safety Code 8.14. Failure to maintain accessible emergency routes during active weather conditions. That carries liability implications if emergency services are delayed. You could almost hear it, the shift, the exact moment the weight moved. Diane's shoulders dropped just a fraction. Not enough for most people to notice, but I did. What needs to happen? She asked, voice lower now. He glanced at me, then back at her. Road needs to be cleared, he said. Immediately, she looked at me then. Really looked this time. Not like a problem. Not like a nuisance. Like the only solution left in front of her. Garrett, she said. And it was the first time she'd used my first name without sounding like she was reading it off a complaint form. Can we talk? I stepped out of the truck. Snow hit my face instantly, cold and sharp, but it felt clear. Clean almost. Go ahead, I said. She took a breath, steadying herself. We're willing to resolve the outstanding issues, she said carefully. The fines, the notices. All of them, I said. She nodded. Yes. In writing, I added. Yes. And a bylaw amendment, I continued, clarifying that functional snow presence on private driveways is not a violation. A flicker of hesitation. Then, all right. And, I said, watching her closely, you stepped down as president. That one hit harder. Her jaw tightened. Eyes narrowed slightly. That's not. It is, I said, not raising my voice, just holding steady. Because this doesn't stop otherwise. Someone else takes your place, or we do this again next winter. The wind picked up, snow swirling between us. For a moment, I thought she might push back. But then she looked past me, at the road, at the people struggling, at the inspector still standing there taking notes. And something in her shifted. Not broken, not defeated, just understood. Fine, she said quietly. I nodded once. Then we're done here. I climbed back into the truck, dropped the blade, and eased forward into Timber Ridge. Snow rolled up in front of the plow, heavy and thick, the engine pushing through it like it always had. Familiar. Controlled. Behind me, the road cleared. One pass, then another. Lines forming where chaos had been an hour before. By the time I finished, it was dark. Lights on in the houses, people standing in driveways, some waving, some just watching. Not cheering, not celebrating. Just seeing. The next week, everything got put on paper. Fines wiped. $2,450 gone. Bylaw amended. Formal notice acknowledging overreach in enforcement. And Diane resigned. No big announcement. No dramatic exit. Just gone from the board list the following Monday. Life settled back after that. Snow kept falling. I kept working. The driveway stayed exactly the same, tracks and all. But something had changed. Not just with the HOA with me. Because I realized something standing there that day, watching all of it unfold. Power isn't about who writes the rules. It's about who understands them and knows when not to bend. Now I'm curious what you think. Was I right to hold the line? Even knowing people would get stuck for a while? Or should I have just cleared the road like I always had and avoided the whole mess? Let me know down in the comments. Because out here, between snow and rules and people trying to control things they don't fully understand, there's not always a clean answer.